Chapter 14, Stage 6, the guideline of the second step of the second tetrad or the sixth stage in the whole of anapanasati practice is this. Experiencing bliss, I shall breathe out, thus he trains himself. Experiencing bliss, I shall breathe in, thus he trains himself. The explanation of this stage follows in all respects the pattern of the explanation of the preceding stage, almost word for word. The only difference is that in this stage, the meditator, instead of rapture, contemplates bliss, which is akin to rapture. But since bliss and rapture are both feelings, we can treat them collectively as one. Therefore the explanation of contemplation of bliss is in every way the same as that of contemplation of rapture. The only thing to be taken into consideration is the differences in the specifically individual characteristics of rapture and bliss. The term bliss, the Pali term for bliss is sukha, which refers to two kinds of pleasant feelings, namely bodily pleasant feeling and mental pleasant feeling. Bodily bliss has its root directly in body or material objects, rupa dhamma, and it is manifested in the body or through the body for the most part. On the other hand, mental bliss is more refined or subtle than the former and, in the main, it has its root in the mental object, namadhamma or dhamrama, and is manifested especially in or through mind. Mental bliss also has a natural effect on the body, inducing physical bliss as a byproduct. But one should contemplate the bliss for the most part as it occurs in the mind. Sukha or bliss as it is experienced during the practice of anapanasati signifies happiness, which, like rapture, is a factor of jhana. As such, bliss here refers to happiness which is experienced in mind only and which is to be contemplated as a kind of feeling too. Carry out the practice of the sixth stage in the same way as the practice of the preceding stage dealt with rapture as an object.
The method of practice. To practice the present stage, the meditator should go back and train himself in contemplating in the fourth stage. In order to clearly note the different factors of jhana once again, when all factors are manifest clearly, he should then concentrate his attention on sukha in order to carry out its contemplation, which agrees in every way with the contemplation of rapture, explained in the fifth stage. Here the method of contemplation or practice will be explained briefly by answering the following questions. 1. What is bliss? What are its characteristics? 2. When does bliss arise? 3. What does it result from? What practice to use in order to induce it? 4. After the arising of bliss, how are knowledge, na, and mindfulness, sati, induced? 5. In what way does the meditator contemplate bliss and what does he abandon or give up thereby? 6. In which sense is the contemplating of bliss sadapanabhavana? 7. While there is gathering together, samadhana, of different dhammas, how does he, the meditator, know the domain and penetrate the samatha? 8. What in detail are the groups of dhammas which are gathered together? 9. Generally speaking, how many dhammas are induced or gathered together in all? 10. What is the distinct and exhaustive method of contemplating the arising, manifesting, and cessation of bliss? The answers will give only the essential points of the method so as to enable one to understand the whole system of practice. 1. Bliss means mental bliss, satasika sukha. Its characteristic is coolness, which directly is the basis for tranquility, passaddhi, or concentration, samadhi. Point 2. Bliss as a feeling in connection with the practice of an anapanasati can arise right from the very beginning onward to the second stage, third stage, and develop at its height into full-fledged bliss in the next 3 stages. 4th, 5th, and 6th. See the details and the explanation of the preceding 2 stages, especially the 4th stage,
where it deals with the factors of jhana. Point 3. Bliss arises from applying the mind wisely in any of the 16 ways connected with breathing in and out, beginning from knowing, pajanana, that the mind is one pointed right up to realizing what should be realized, sakiktaba sakakaroto. By the power of contemplating on breathing in and out, all the 16 ways correspond to the 16 ways for the arising of rapture, see page 325 to 328. 4. Bliss has thus arisen in any of these 16 ways it is experienced by the meditator by means of in and out breathing. Mindfulness, besides functioning as mindfulness, forms the basis for contemplation that leads to concentration and also comes to function as insight knowledge. Anupasanana, bliss is manifest and serves as object, dramana, of contemplation. On the other hand, mindfulness is manifest as a means of contemplating the object of bliss. The meditator experiences bliss by means of that mindfulness, leading to concentration, and that knowledge, now leading to insight. For details, see the explanation of the fifth stage, page 332.5. The meditator contemplates bliss as impermanent, unsatisfactory and no self, and, in doing so, he abandons the perceptions of permanence. Pleasure and self respectively, he comes to be weary of bliss, and, in doing so, he abandons enjoying it, he becomes dispassionate and abandons passion. He puts an end to it and abandons arousing, he renounces bliss and abandons clinging to it. See details in the fifth stage, pages 342 to 348. 6. While the meditator is contemplating bliss as impermanent, etc., that is called Satapanabhavana, development of mindfulness. 1. In the sense of non-excess of the mental states arisen through contemplation. 2. In the sense of making faculties, etc., function jointly for the same end through the power of contemplation by means of mindfulness.
3. In the sense that he is able to give rise to energy which is in conformity with different mental states, including faculties. 4. In the sense that he practices intensively over and over again. Thus it is in this fourfold sense that the contemplation of bliss, in the true sense of the word, amounts to bhavana, development. See stage 5. Pages 350 to 357 for further details. Point 7. Development, bhavana, in its fourfold sense being in full swing, different mental states, such as faculties and the like, are induced and gathered together. With the very rising or manifestation of those mental states, the meditator knows their domain, gakara, or object, rama, and penetrates their samatha, benefit of calm, resulting from the gathering together of those mental objects, as explained in stage 5, pages 362 to 366. Point 8. The meditator induces 4 groups of dhammas, namely, the 5 faculties, the 5 powers, the 7 factors of enlightenment and the 8 links of the path. Each of these groups has its own significance. Each constituent of the 4 groups has its own specific function in conformity with the whole practice. See stage 5, pages 359 to 384. 9. Generally speaking, 29 kinds of dhammas or states become manifest by way of gathering together, right from the faculties up to nibbana. The deathless, see stage 5, pages 385 to 404. Point 10. The distinct and exhaustive method of contemplating bliss means to note the arising, manifesting or appearance and ceasing of bliss together with perception and thought which arise in succession to bliss. In case of arising, the meditator notes the condition for arising and ceasing of each of the trio. With regard to appearance, he contemplates and closely sees each of the trio, bliss, perception and thought, as impermanent, unsatisfactory and no self, so much so that dissolution, fear and voidness respectively become manifest. See stage 5, pages 410 to 415.
To sum up, the practice of the 6th stage of anapanasati corresponds to the 5th stage in all respects. The only difference being that in the former the object of contemplation is the feeling of bliss, while in the latter it is the feeling of rapture. The contemplation of bliss has been dealt with separately because bliss is a basis of clinging far stronger than rapture. For this reason, the result of contemplating bliss is naturally higher than that of contemplating rapture, and, moreover, feeling is thus experienced in its entirety. Stage 7, the guideline for practicing the 7th stage of anapanasati, is in the master's own words. Experiencing the mental formation, I shall breathe out, thus he trains himself. Experiencing the mental formation, I shall breathe in, thus he trains himself. Now the points to be examined are, what is the mental formation, siddhasakra? When, and to whom, does it manifest, in what way is it experienced? Here the mental formation is perception and feeling, which fall into the category of phenomena bound to the mind, satasakadhamma. Perception and feeling are called the mental formation because they fabricate or condition, sakaranti, the mind. In the 2 preceding stages, the trio of feeling, perception, and thought was dealt with. But in the present stage, only feeling and perception are dealt with by name, and thought as such has been left out. The reason is that in the present case, thought, vitaka, is included in mind, citta, itself and does not function as a conditioning factor thereof. To make the above point more clear, as we observed, feeling is the specific and immediate condition for perception. And perception in its turn is the specific and immediate condition for thought. It follows that thought or thinking, or mind as referred to here, has both feeling and perception as its conditions. As mentioned earlier, stage 6, page 406, with the arising of a feeling, there arises perception, Sovanna. Sovanna has two phases. Firstly, it is a coming to awareness which involves both recognition and 88 noting the feeling as to what kind of feeling it is. Secondly, after being aware, it is to perceive or misconceive the feeling as an entity, self or as mine and me with the sense of attachment. Perception, in its first phase, refers to perception in the 5 aggregates, pancakanda, and arises automatically and naturally each time any of the senses comes into contact with its corresponding object, that is. It does not involve volition, satana, as yet, so it is neither wholesome, kusala, nor unwholesome, akusala. Conversely, perception in the second phase is positively a form of defilement, kilesa. It is unwholesome because it is rooted in delusion, moha. Being rooted in delusion, moha, it causes one to perform any kind of action, especially mental action, manokama, kama, which means to cherish a thought volitionally to act in some way with the appearance of thinking. Mental action is done. The very act of performing the mental action presupposes that the mind has been conditioned through perception and feeling to act that way. Whether or not any bodily action, kayakama, or verbal action, vachikama, is performed. It is with action in relation to the mental action that perception and feeling are called conditions for the mind, kama. Because if there is neither perception nor feeling, no thinking or thought can be conceived. It should be noted here that perception and feeling in the past can also condition the mind in the same way as do perception and feeling in the present at a given moment. All of them. There are also indirect causes or conditions in the background. By them are meant various forms of perception which serve as supplements in different ways or forms. They are instinctive in nature. They go under such names as perception of permanence, nikasana, perception of pleasure,
Sukhasana, perception of beauty, subhasana, and the like. These forms of perception are supplementary to, and become blended with, perception of form, of sound, of smell, of taste, etc. Which is to perceive or conceive form, etc. as entities as him, me, his, mine. When the two kinds of perception of permanence, etc. on the one hand and perception of form, etc. on the other, interact on each other, different ways of thinking or thought come into being. All this shows that all kinds of perception are conditions for the mind siddhasakra. Now a point especially worth noticing is that in the present stage of anapanasati perception is placed before feeling. Generally speaking, or in all other cases, feeling is always put before perception. See, for instance, the trio of feeling, perception, and thought, as dealt with in the 5th stage. The fact that, in the present stage, perception is before feeling shows that it is the perception itself that is the ultimate condition of mind. If a feeling is free from or does not involve perception, i.e. if a feeling does not give rise to perception, the feeling alone cannot condition the mind, as in the case of the feeling of an arahant. To sum up, it is only feeling which is connected with perception, or perception which is connected with feeling, that can function as a condition for mind. If there is no feeling, then perception cannot take place. Hence there is nothing to condition the mind. The same holds true for feeling. The feeling arises, but if it does not condition perception, it follows feeling does not condition the mind. On the other hand, if feeling conditions or becomes the condition for the arising of perception, then it does condition the mind. This is the way perception and feeling function in their capacity as the mental formation siddhasakra. In the present stage, feeling is contemplated as being a condition for mind as opposed to the two preceding stages in which feeling was contemplated as such.
In the 5th stage, feeling was contemplated in the form of rapture, and the 7th stage, feeling is thoroughly contemplated, or closely watched with respect to its function of at first. conditioning perception and thereby finally conditioning the mind. Point 1 should clearly understand this difference of contemplation of feeling on different levels. Otherwise one is apt to be confused because names are very much alike, such as rapture, bliss, etc. And the explanation of each stage is based on common principles following a certain pattern. We now come to consider the next point: when and to whom does the mental formation become manifest? One should clearly observe and grasp the important principle that underlies the whole practice of anapanasati, that the objects to be contemplated in each stage must be present and manifest to the meditator right from the very beginning up to the stage that he is at present undertaking. As for feeling, which is the object to be contemplated in the present stage or tetrad, we can say that it has apparently been present all the time. Right from the first stage dealing with contemplating the long in and out breaths as such up to the present. But when practicing the first stage, the meditator gathers his attention and focuses it on the in and out breathing as such, rather than contemplating the feeling, which in its initial stage of development is in fact arising at that time as a result of the very act of contemplation, even though the feeling, whether rapture or bliss, in the first stage is in its developing state, and as such very faint or insignificant, yet it is feeling after all, after the meditator has gone through all the stages contemplating in and out breaths, etc. From the first stage onwards and has reached this present 7th stage, he is advised to go back and start contemplating again from the first stage onwards.